On March 30th, 1944, General Reinhard Gehlen, Chief of Foreign Armies East, delivered his assessment to the German High Command. His intelligence apparatus predicted a major Soviet summer offensive, not against Army Group Center in Belarus, but against Army Group North Ukraine and the Balkans. The analysis reflected German fixation on economic assets. The Balkans represented Germany's last accessible petroleum reserves. Gehlen's prediction shaped German strategic dispositions for the next 7 weeks. Hitler, convinced of the southern threat, approved the transfer of LVI Panzer Corps from Army Group Center southward on May 20th. The Corps comprised 2 experienced formations, the 4th and 5th Panzer Divisions, or their departure stripped Army Group Center of critical mobile reserves at the precise moment Soviet planners finalized Operation Bagration. The intelligence failure stemmed from mirror imaging. German analysts assumed the Red Army operated under the same logistical constraints that paralyzed Wehrmacht operations. They discounted the symbolic value Stalin placed on Belorussia, where German forces had occupied Soviet territory since 1941. Army Group Center now stretched across 1,100 kilometers with 38 divisions, many understrength, several lacking mobile transport. The Army Group's armored reserve had been reduced to fragments, individual tank battalions incapable of coordinated counterattacks. If you're interested in how wars are actually decided by logistics, math, and doctrine, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and stay tuned for more in-depth World War analysis. Let's continue. In Moscow, the Stavka assembled 4 fronts against this overextension: 1st Baltic, 3rd Belarusian, 2nd Belarusian, and 1st Belarusian. The force ratio in target sectors approached 6-to-1 in infantry, 10-to-1 in armor. Concealment efforts hid this concentration. Units moved only at night. Radio discipline remained absolute. Dummy formations proliferated opposite the Ukrainian flank, sustaining German expectations of a southern offensive. The operational architecture demanded precise timing. Stavka designated June 22nd, the 3rd anniversary of Barbarossa, as the launch date. The 2-front trap required German commanders to choose: reinforce the collapsing center or defend the intact southern wing. Either decision led to catastrophic weakness somewhere along the line. On the night of June 19th, 3 years of preparation detonated across Belorussia. Partisan demolition teams placed explosive charges on 10,500 separate points along the railroad network. Rail lines buckled. Switch mechanisms shattered. Bridge timbers collapsed into rivers. Within hours, the entire transportation infrastructure west of Minsk entered paralysis. The timing reflected operational precision. These demolitions struck 3 days before the main Soviet assault, calculated to create maximum disruption during the exact window when Army Group Center would require rapid movement of reserves. 10,500 demolitions represented systematic destruction coordinated across hundreds of kilometers. For commanders attempting to shift reserves, while the paralysis imposed catastrophic delays. Units ordered to threatened positions found themselves immobilized in rail yards. The few functioning rail lines became congestion points, vulnerable to Soviet air interdiction. 3 days remained before the offensive began. Those 3 days would pass with Wehrmacht reserves trapped behind severed rail lines. At 400 hours on June 22, 1944, 3 years to the hour after Barbarossa, Soviet artillery preparation shattered the pre-dawn silence. Reconnaissance in force probed German positions, identifying weak points and mapping minefield gaps. The main offensive erupted 24 hours later. On June 23rd, Soviet forces unleashed the full weight of their preparation. The breakthrough mechanics followed Soviet deep battle doctrine. 90-minute artillery preparation, followed by combined arms assault teams spearheaded by T-34/85 medium tanks. The 85mm main guns engaged German positions at ranges where Wehrmacht anti-tank weapons proved ineffective. The 252nd Infantry Division disintegrated under the assault. Divisional strongpoints became isolated as Soviet penetrations bypassed them, Without mobile reserves, German commanders possessed no counter-penetration capability. IL-2 Sturmovik ground attack aircraft, operating in regimental strength, devastated German attempts to shift reserves. The armored engine cowlings of these aircraft negated light flak defenses. By nightfall on June 23rd, the front had shattered across a 140-kilometer frontage. Soviet penetrations reached depths of 15 kilometers in multiple sectors. By June 24th, the tactical map at 53 Army Corps headquarters reveals a nightmare geometry. Soviet forces have driven twin penetrations north and south of Vitebsk, their spearheads now curving westward behind the city. The 4th Luftwaffe Field Division and 206th Infantry Division, roughly 35,000 men, occupy a shrinking perimeter measuring barely 15 kilometers across. The pocket has closed. Inside the encirclement, ammunition stocks drop below critical thresholds. Artillery batteries ration shells to 10 rounds per gun per day. Supply columns have vanished, interdicted by partisan demolitions or overrun by the encircling tide. At 3rd Panzer Army headquarters, staff officers prepare withdrawal orders. The tactical logic appears irrefutable. 53 Army Corps must break out immediately. Fuel reserves remain sufficient for a fighting retreat. Every hour of delay allows Soviet rifle divisions to thicken the encirclement ring. The withdrawal order never arrives. Field Marshal Ernst Busch, commanding Army Group Center, vetoes the evacuation. Vitebsk will be held, he signals. The Führer has designated it a fortified place. Hitler's fortress doctrine overrides frontline judgment. 53 Army Corps remains bound by orders that transform tactical defeat into certain destruction. Simultaneously, the Tiger Line defensive positions near Bogushevsk collapse. On June 24th, 120 Soviet tanks emerge from assembly areas and drive westward. The attack overwhelms the line by midday. By June 25th, a 50-kilometer gap has opened in the front. At Sirotino, the Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army enters the operational space. This tank-heavy formation drives into the rear areas of German positions. The appearance of fresh mechanized forces transforms tactical breakthrough into operational collapse. 200 kilometers south, the 9th Army's position at Bobruisk deteriorates. 41st Panzer Corps occupies defensive positions, with divisions stretched across excessive frontage. From the north, Soviet 9th Tank Corps advances in 2 columns, bypassing German strongpoints and driving toward the Berezina River crossings. At 9 o'clock on June 26th, forward reconnaissance units reach the western bank of the Berezina, 8 kilometers behind Encirclements Panzer Corps' main defensive line. The encirclement geometry becomes clear by midday. Soviet forces control the bridges. 31 Panzer Corps finds itself cut off from rearward communications. Here, the Corps occupies a pocket bounded by the Berezina to the west and advancing Soviet rifle divisions to the east. German engineers attempt to demolish the bridges. 3 detonation attempts fail due to partisan sabotage of electrical firing systems. The final span collapses under the weight of vehicles attempting simultaneous crossing. 70,000 men occupy an enclosed pocket east of an impassable river. The Bobruisk encirclement is complete. At 0500 hours on June 26th, Lewis's Army Corps launched its breakout attempt from Vitebsk. 5 divisions, critically low on ammunition, drove westward into Soviet 39th Army positions. The ammunition shortage crippled German effectiveness from the first hour. Artillery batteries fell silent. Infantry companies advanced with soldiers carrying fewer than 30 rounds per rifle. When KV-1 heavy tanks appeared along the breakout corridor, German forces lacked the firepower to penetrate them. The 52-ton Soviet breakthrough tanks functioned as mobile fortresses, anchoring defensive positions that channeled German columns into killing zones. By nightfall, the breakout had collapsed. June 27th brought capitulation. 20,000 German soldiers entered Soviet captivity. 5 divisions ceased to exist as combat formations. Field Marshal Busch's assertion that "our prestige is at stake. Vitebsk is the only Eastern Front town whose loss will cause the world to sit up and take notice," proved prophetic, though not in the manner he intended. The roar arrives first. 400 aircraft of the Soviet 16th Air Army, massed formations of IL-2 Sturmovix and PE-2 dive bombers converging on coordinates southeast of Bobruisk on June 27th. Below them, 31 Panzer Corps writhes in a shrinking perimeter. 70,000 men compressed into killing range. The first wave drops incendiaries. The second, high explosive. The third targets anything still moving. Marshal Zhukov observes as the systematic destruction unfolds with industrial precision. Smoke columns merge into a single black pillar, visible for 40 kilometers. When the bombers depart after 6 hours, 10,000 German soldiers lie dead in the Cauldron. Another 6,000 surrender to Red Army rifle divisions, advancing through the debris field. The same day, Orsha falls. The mathematics compound beyond Hitler's comprehension. Vitebsk, 20,000 prisoners, 5 divisions erased. Bobruisk, 16,000 casualties from 1 day's fighting. Orsha, the hinge position abandoned. In 6 days, Army Group Center has lost 130,000 men. A Field Marshal Busch receives notification of his relief the following morning. Model arrives to inherit wreckage. Divisions that exist only as staff cars and radio sets. Corps headquarters commanding phantom formations. Dawn breaks over Bobruisk on June 29th. The 20th Panzer Division begins its breakout toward Osipovichi. At the head of the column rolls an anomaly, a captured JS-2 heavy tank, its 122mm main gun and sloped armor intact. The Germans have christened it Stalin's tank. The JS-2 mounts frontal armor thick enough to deflect standard German anti-tank rounds. As the column moves west toward the Shatkowo Bridge, Soviet reconnaissance units observe the approaching formation. The lead vehicle's distinctive silhouette reads as friendly. Stalin's tank advances unmolested through the first screening positions. On behind this armored vanguard, 70,000 troops compress into the narrow breakout corridor. The 5th Guards Tank Army drives toward the Berezina crossings, directly across the intended withdrawal route. The question facing German commanders shifts from whether to abandon Bobruisk to whether forces can reach the river before Soviet armor blocks the crossings entirely. At 600 hours on June 30th, the lead elements of 5th Guards Tank Army reached the Berezina at Chernjauka. T-34/85 tanks ground to a halt on the eastern bank. The waterway measured 40 meters across, swollen by late June rains. Behind the lead tanks, vehicles stretched back 3 kilometers, a steel artery that had severed the 4th Army's last viable withdrawal route. I 12th Army Corps and 39th Panzer Corps, approximately 100,000 personnel, were now caught in a shrinking pocket east of Minsk. At 0540 hours on July 1st, 12th Panzer Division punched eastward through devastated terrain. Panzer Grenadier Regiment 25 formed the armored spearhead. The mission: extract survivors from the Bobruisk pocket before Soviet forces sealed the corridor permanently. The link-up at Malinovka occurred mid-morning. Exhausted remnants, men who had survived the catastrophic air bombardment, staggered toward the German relief column. 25,000 survivors, barely 1/3 of the trapped force, escaped westward under sporadic Soviet artillery fire. On July 3rd, Minsk fell. Leeward elements of 2nd Guards Tank Corps drove into the city's outskirts at 0800 hours. The city's capture severed the primary logistics node sustaining German forces across a 300-kilometer front. On July 3rd, the commanders of 15 doomed divisions gather inside the Cauldron east of Minsk. The mathematics are inescapable. Over 100,000 men compressed into shrinking terrain. Soviet armor controlling every exit route. Ammunition stocks measured in hours. The conference produces no unified breakout. The trapped formations lack the fuel, ammunition, and cohesion required for organized movement. On July 8th, Lieutenant General Vinkens Müller meets Soviet representatives of the 50th Army at the Pitych River. The formal surrender transfers 35,000 survivors into captivity. Müller's assessment contains no military euphemism. We were forced to surrender because we had nothing more to eat. Fourth Army, the formation that held the Minsk salient for 3 years, terminates operational existence. 15 divisions deleted from the German order of battle within 5 days. On July 13th, as German formations in Belorussia disintegrated, Marshal Konev unleashed the first Ukrainian front against Army Group North Ukraine. The Lvov-Sandomier's offensive opened with crushing force. For 3 weeks preceding the assault, the 1st Guards Tank Army, over 500 armored vehicles, moved westward in complete radio silence, traveling exclusively at night. Soviet signals units maintained the tank army's original electronic signature 200 kilometers to the rear, broadcasting false traffic patterns. German intelligence assessed forces at perhaps 60% of actual strength. The 1st Guards Tank Army remained completely invisible. By nightfall on July 13th, Soviet mechanized spearheads drove 15 kilometers into German rear areas. The concealed tank army surged forward through the gap, sustained by Lend-Lease trucks that provided motorized capability. Horse-drawn Wehrmacht supply columns could not match. By July 18th, the encirclement snapped shut around Brody. 13th Army Corps, 85,000 men from 5 divisions, occupied a shrinking perimeter. The 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS, Galician Division, 12,000 Ukrainian volunteers, held positions directly in the Soviet path. The tactical mathematics proved merciless. Wehrmacht doctrine assumed resupply by horse-drawn wagon. The Red Army operated on a motorized logistical system that had delivered 182,938 Studebaker trucks by this date. While German units rationed ammunition, Soviet forces maintained pressure from all directions. At 0300 hours on July 19th, the breakout began. Assault columns formed in darkness. Tired infantry clumped around remaining Panther tanks. Soviet artillery opened at 400 meters, tearing gaps in German columns. For 3 days, the pocket convulsed. Studebaker trucks repositioned blocking forces faster than German foot columns could march. A mobile containment system the horse-drawn logistics could not counter. By July 22nd, 13th Army Corps ceased to exist. 5 divisions annihilated. The Galician Division recorded the highest casualty ratio. Of 12,000 men, only 3,000 reached German lines. The Studebaker US-6 rolls westward, its 6-wheel drive churning through summer mud. By July 1944, 182,938 Lend-Lease trucks have transformed the Red Army from a force that advanced on foot into a mechanized juggernaut, sustaining operations across distances that would have starved earlier offensives. The German Fourth Army's final supply column moves at 3 miles per hour. Horses strain against wagon traces, their fodder requirements consuming transport capacity that could move ammunition. A single German division requires 350 tons of supplies daily. Its wagon columns can move only 125 tons. The mathematics guarantee starvation. Soviet factories in 1944 manufactured 11,000 T-34/85 tanks, their designs optimized for mass production. German tank production delivers fewer than 6,000 Panthers and Tigers combined, many immobilized by mechanical failures before reaching combat. Technical advantages cannot compensate for numerical inferiority measured in ratios of 5-to-1, often 10-to-1. The material advantage produces its human accounting. By early August 1944, Army Group Center has lost 28 divisions, over 400,000 men killed, wounded, or captured. The figure represents more than a quarter of Germany's entire Eastern Front strength. The prisoner columns form an unprecedented spectacle. Marshal Zhukov observes the destruction. Hundreds of bombers struck blow after blow at the enemy group. Scores of trucks, cars, and tanks were burning. The timeline creates stark parallels. On June 6th, Allied forces landed in Normandy. By early August, they advanced approximately 50 miles inland. Soviet forces advanced 300 to 400 miles in the same period. When the Normandy campaign produces approximately 200,000 German casualties, the Eastern Front collapse, combining Bagration and Brody, produces over 400,000. The disparity in scale remains largely unrecognized in Western reporting. The Eastern collapse represents the single largest German military defeat of the war. March 30th, 1944. Colonel Reinhard Gehlen assembles reconnaissance imagery and agent reports. The intelligence assessment identifies precise indicators: Soviet rail movements concentrating opposite the Central Front, radio silence on formations opposite Belorussia, camouflaged assembly areas east of the Dnieper. The prediction generates no operational response. Gehlen commands no divisions, controls no reserves. His role terminates where analysis meets decision, or Hitler's fixation on Romanian oil creates gravitational pull southward. Panzer divisions concentrate opposite the First Ukrainian Front, while Gehlen's maps show Soviet armor massing in Belorussia. June 23rd validates every element of the assessment. The offensive strikes precisely where predicted, achieves breakthrough within hours, encircles formations whose vulnerability was documented 3 months prior. The vindication arrives simultaneously with catastrophe. Strategic warning without operational authority produces perfect foresight combined with total impotence. The intelligence officer's paradox that Gehlen lived through as the Wehrmacht ignored his prediction and marched toward its greatest defeat. If you found this story valuable, subscribe for more deep dives into the operational history of World War II. Here, the battles that decided the war often receive the least attention in Western histories, and that's exactly where we focus. Drop a comment below. What war operation should we cover next?